children actually have such an intuition of this. I always remember, and I wrote a book called Climate Generation. There's one story I tell in there of my own son when he was about 6 years old. We went down to the bog where his granny lives in County Galway, and we were walking, and I said, why don't we pick some flowers for Granny? It's beautiful spring flowers, wildflowers. So we started picking the flowers out of the bog, beautiful flowers, until he had a bouquet of flowers. And he picked one so gently, and he turned to me and said, Mum, Mother Earth has such beautiful hair. Do you think she can feel it when we pull it out?
Welcome to the Save Our Sperrins campaign, Voices from the Frontline. I'm Marella, your host and a member of the Save Our Sperrins team. At the heart of this struggle are the voices of local people, farmers, families and young campaigners whose homes, work and families are rooted in this place. Their voices are joined by supporters from across the world, standing in solidarity, from professors to artists, from those offering vast expertise to those whose presence alone is an act of support. All have stood with us. In this series, we share stories of resistance, resilience, and hopes from those determined to protect these mountains, their land, their rivers, the very air they breathe, and their community. Let's get started. Today, I'm joined by Dr Lorna Gold, President of the Laudato Si Movement, an international network inspired by Pope Francis's encyclical Laudato Si, which calls on all of us to care for our common home. The movement brings together people of faith and goodwill across the world who are working for climate justice, ecological renewal, and a culture of care that embraces all beings. Before taking up her current role, Lorna spent almost 2 decades with Trócaire, Ireland's Catholic Development Agency, leading policy and advocacy on climate justice. She also chaired the board of Laudato Si Movement before becoming its executive director. Through her writing, teaching and advocacy, including her book, Climate Generation, Awakening to Our Children's Future, she has helped many people see that the ecological crisis is not only political or scientific, but also deeply moral and spiritual. Later this year, Lorna will travel to Brazil as part of the Laudato Si delegation to COP30, where world leaders will meet to address the climate emergency, a summit expected to focus strongly on mining, minerals, and the so-called green transition. It feels timely to speak with her now, as here in the Sperrins, we continue to face our own questions about extractivism, value, and what true care for the web of life really means. Lorna, you're very welcome, and it is wonderful to have you here with us to share your insights and your experiences. Might you begin by telling us a little bit about who you are, where you're based right now, and within that explain about what Laudato Si is all about for our listeners?
Thanks, Marella. It's great to be here this morning. It's a beautiful morning out there. I got out for a lovely walk with my dog and the sunrise. I am, as you said, Lorna Gold. I'm just taken over in February of this year as the Executive Director of the Laudato Si Movement. That's the global movement that was set up in 2015 to really promote and implement the vision of Pope Francis in Laudato Si. You might recognise my accent isn't Irish. I come from Scotland. I grew up in a place called Falkirk, which is in central Scotland. And I think that framed really my whole background. I grew up in the shadow of an oil refinery, but also grew up with a family and a mum who just loved nature. And I think those two things, her love of nature, her faith, really shaped me as a person. As I said, I took over as the Executive Director of Laudato Si Movement earlier this year. But I worked for Trócaire, the Irish, well, obviously people in Ireland know what chokra is, but I worked for chokra for 20 years. And you could say that's where I cut my teeth, both as a campaigner, an activist, a researcher. I helped to kind of bring about several major campaigns on climate justice, such as the fossil fuel divestment campaign, which led to Ireland becoming the first country in the world to legislate for divestment. And I guess all of that, if I really think about it, is rooted in the experience I had in chokra, like even 20 years ago, working with people from very poor countries who were already experiencing climate change. We didn't really call it climate change, and there was some kind of ambiguity about what it was. But the farmers we worked with in Africa were like the canary in the coal mine. They were telling us that the seasons are changing, the rains aren't coming. And it was really that climate justice element, the injustice of it, that got me in the first instance into working in this area.
Okay, that's a great opening. And could I just draw you back there? This podcast actually has an international audience. Could you give me a 2-line explanation about what chokra does in the world?
So chokra is the Irish Caritas organisation. It's a Catholic inspired international development charity. So it has what it calls a dual mandate. So most of its work is overseas, working with communities, regardless of faith or religion, in humanitarian situations, promoting integral human development, but also has a mandate to work at home here in Ireland, where I'm based, to educate us on the causes of injustice. So I worked there as head of policy and advocacy and worked on research as well.
Okay, that's great. That clarifies it for us. Moving on a little bit, I'd like to ask you, how might faith communities, and particularly the Catholic Church, help people find deeper value-based way of responding to what's happening to the natural world around us?
It's a very good question. And to me, to me, it's about the heart of faith. And there's something really profound about the theologies that we have. So if you think about our theologies, whether you're a Christian or whatever religion you are, your worldview is very much shaped by your kind of core narrative of why you tell yourself you're here, why we believe that we're on this planet. So faith communities really, since time immemorial, have had a role in shaping our relationship with the natural world. If you think of Buddhist, of Islam, every sacred text speaks to our relationship with the created world. Now, the Catholic Church, you could say, had not really focused so much on this aspect of faith. In fact, there was probably, and still remains in some circles, a view that our role is to dominate the world, is to kind of subdue nature. This is something that really dominated through really the last 2 centuries, and it drove the Industrial Revolution. I did my PhD on this topic of like the kind of stories we tell ourselves around economics, and how it relates to faith. But with the kind of the more recently, both in the broader Christian kind of community, there has been a resurgence in the kind of the notion or the idea of communion with nature, God's presence in nature, our responsibility towards nature. So Pope Francis, when he launched Laudato Si, this essentially it's an encyclical, it's a papal teaching in 2015. He really revolutionized. I mean, in some ways it was completely in line with Catholic teaching, but on another level, he lifted up something that had been almost forgotten, and that is our sacred duty to care for the earth. And the fact that we as Catholics, as Christians, we have no right to be pillaging and destroying God's creation. And recently when Pope Leo actually spoke at the conference we had in Rome, he underlined this, underscored this, that when we meet our Maker, if that's what we believe as Catholics, we will be asked, how have you cared for the earth? And we will be asked what our answer will be. So to me, it's a sacred responsibility. And the work of our movement, Laudato Si Movement, is really about finding strategies, finding ways to engage people, whether that's in their parishes, whether it's the Return to Nature programme that the Irish bishops have brought about, whether it's about calling for church organisations to get out of fossil fuels, whether it's about organising different ways to incorporate nature in our prayers, in our spirituality. There are countless ways that faith communities can really get involved, and it's a growing movement right across the world of people who are getting involved in faith-based environmental action.
Oh, that is so interesting. So personally, myself, I believe that we have moved away from the path of St. Francis or the Catholic Church in the earlier, back in the early millennium, and then for it to be taken over by sort of more hierarchical thinking, linear thinking, and now we're swinging back because of the last pope. And it has always been my belief that when the faith was taken really out of the people on the ground in the villages and the small and the love of nature, it was also all taken at the same time, and then it became more controlled, and now it seems to be coming around full circle, and I kind of like to see that development. It's interesting. Lorna, what sort of a conversation do you think it would take from folks seeing the natural world as something out there to recognizing it within our own spiritual being and belonging?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think that, yeah, just coming back to what you said before about this kind of return, I see that around me in the Laudato Si movement. It's all about the grassroots. It's about enabling local circles, local communities, people to take action. And I think that, like, we can overthink it, actually. We can really overthink this and think it's kind of, it's quite complicated. But actually, the best thing we can all do is go outside and be still and discover God again, or the divine, the sacred in nature. That's why I started by telling you about my walk, because I got up this morning and I mean, I'm crazy busy, but I always go for a walk in nature to ground myself.
Yeah.
And when I go out into nature, I always had this feeling that I'm coming home. And it was something deep within me that's been with me since a child, walking with my mum, like kind of celebrating a sunrise or a rainbow or a small little creature. And it's that sense of being home, which I think is, I mean, it's borne out in science. I mean, if you think of Jane Goodall and the impact that she had in, I know it was all of her research and everything, there's huge complexities around it all. I watched a documentary at the weekend all about the chimpanzees and everything. It's not like Disney World out there with nature either. But that sense of connection is so deep. And to me, that's where it starts or can begin again for people. That sense of wonder that we can instill in ourselves, rediscover this. I mean, when I go out into nature, and it's almost like rewilding yourself, just finding that space, that time. And often the joy that comes from being there. And to me, that's the font of so much other things that then can happen. And that's one of the things that our movement has really started, or kind of recovered. I mean, this is so, it's looking at the kind of Celtic Christianity, as you said, before it was dominated by the structures of patriarchy and colonialism. It's all there. It's all there. And there's a natural kind of recovery and restoration of that happening.
That's right.
So yeah, those rituals that faith can bring are so important. Just one ritual that I can share, that like rituals around holy water, are are so ancient. The holy wells that in Ireland we have, blessings of water, which kind of have become detached. Like you do that, you baptize your child, and it's in this sterile environment in a church. But actually, the first baptisms were in rivers.
Uh-huh.
How amazing that must have been! Like like the power of a river. So yeah, I think this going outside, being in nature, allowing that reconnection to kind of almost take over you. I love the work of John O'Donoghue, and I often listen to John while I'm walking. Um, and I find that there's a lot of resonance there. That's just some
Yeah.
thoughts.
Yeah, no, it's some great thoughts there. And of course, the passing of what's his name, Manchon, this and his work with the
Yeah,
wells. I was watching a program of his over the weekend,
yeah,
and
yeah,
he was just so on it, speaking about the wells. And yeah, we forgot about it. They were like, we had a well in our schoolyard growing up as kids, and it had been there for eons, and you just sort of forgot about it. It was there, but it wasn't there,
yeah.
And I remember when I was a youngster, I used to have cause to ride my small little pony up a short piece of road, about a quarter of a mile long, but it was a very busy main road. And so I was very small, and I was quite close to the grass, and I could see back then the exhaust fumes that came out of traffic made the grass all grey. I don't know if you remember that, but we've changed it
Yeah,
since then. I used to go along apologising to the grass because of this, and there was
yeah.
no knowledge of poisons, no knowledge of climate or anything like that. But I apologised to the grass because I could see that it was being damaged by the fumes of the exhaust, and I could have only been 6 or 7.
And in fact, yeah, children actually have such an intuition of this. I always remember, and I wrote a book called Climate Generation,
I'm coming to
Awakening
that. I have it in here
Children's
somewhere.
Future, yeah, which
Yep.
tells him a story. But there's one story I tell in there of my own son when he was about 6 years old. We went
Mm-hmm.
down to the bog where his granny lives in County Galway, and we were walking, and I said, "Why don't we pick some flowers for Granny? It's beautiful spring flowers, wildflowers." So we started picking the flowers out of the bog, beautiful flowers, until he had a bouquet of flowers. And he picked one so gently, and he turned to me and said, "Mum, Mother Earth has such beautiful hair. Do you think she can feel it when we pull it out?"
From the words from the mouths of babes, huh?
Which just like made me kind of speechless.
Yeah,
Like that, how that purity of intuition,
yeah.
with no kind of, like, this was spontaneous from a child. And then everybody goes their own ways. They're now big teenagers, now taller than
Aye.
me. But
Uh-huh.
you have to believe that that connection is so deep in them. It remains in them. It's something they carry through their lives. But yeah.
Oh, I still apologise when I go out and pick a handful of mint to put in the dinner. So I apologise for that. Please,
We have
please,
to do it, but it's the awareness,
please
isn't it?
gift
It's
it.
that
Yeah, it is
awareness.
awareness. It is awareness.
Yeah.
Let's move on, Lorna. Looking ahead to COP30, which happens in Brazil this November, the big UN climate gathering where mining and green transition will be front and central. I understand you'll be there with the Laudato Si Movement delegation. And with the mining and the green transition probably set to dominate COP30, how might we navigate the space between progress and protection, finding ways that to meet our needs and yet without losing sight, I guess, of our duty and care for the earth that sustains us?
Big question. Big question. So I mean, it's really challenging because we're in, I like to think that we're in this in-between time. We're in an in-between, we're in a transition right now. And when you're in a transition, there are very, very difficult decisions and trade-offs. And you're faced with these kind of what we need to do now to safeguard the future versus the impact that that has on people, nature now. And I think Pope Francis was very good here in Laudato Si, where he urged us not to fall into false solutions. So by false solution, he was meaning both technical fixes, believing that technical fixes, such as electric, I'll come on to talk about it, like that we only need to electrify everything and then it will all be fine. You know, we need just to have electric cars and then we're sorted. You know, we've done our bit. Or things like the poor, those in poorer countries paying the price, allowing that to happen, which is another thing that's happening and will be discussed at COP30, will be like that we don't really do the deep work that's needed to transform our economies. So there's this in-between time which is really crucial, and it points to the real scale of the issue, the scale of the challenge, because climate change is a symptom. It's not a thing that exists on its own. It's a symptom of an economic system that is profoundly unjust. It's dominated by economic theories such as limitless growth, which are untenable. We know that now. The earth is a finite closed system. You can't have infinite growth in a closed system. So we need to, and it's extractive. And the power that extracting corporations have is actually now potentially gone beyond the power of governments to control them. We have trillionaires and we have many billionaires who exercise so much power, and they can exercise it, as we know, looking at what's happening around us with impunity. So it's a very challenging context to be looking at this climate negotiations, and we don't have all we don't have all the solutions. Well, we don't have all the solutions right now to make things change quickly. Let's say we have the solutions. We know what we need to do to tackle the crisis, but the political will to make the big changes is lacking. So when I talk about big changes, I talk about shifting to an economic system that is rooted in circularity, in regenerative economics, in businesses that uphold human rights and environmental rights. So we have to be continuously lobbying for those bigger changes. So the Chokra, for example, is part of a big campaign around a business and human rights treaty, which would set in international law mandatory guidelines or mandatory responsibilities of businesses to limit the impact of extractivism and mining. That treaty it has been on the table for many years. it's getting some traction now. However, there are countries that want to block it passing, but that would go some way to addressing some of the issues of rare earth minerals in this transition period. But we need to see electrification and things like electric cars as only one part of the solution. They're probably a very tiny part, an essential part, but a tiny part of the overall climate solution. The other things that we need, such as a fossil fuel treaty for the wind down of fossil fuels, such as stronger regulation around supply chains, design changes so that every product that we have can be replaced, repaired, that we don't need to be constantly buying new things. These are all, and the wonderful thing is there are so many people working on these, but we need to change our politics. That is the single biggest thing we need to change now, is we've got ourselves into a governance situation in the world where, I don't need to tell people how dire the governance situation is. The solutions are there, and the kind of bigger solutions are also there to tackle ecological degradation and climate change. But we do need a change of the political environment.
Here in the Sperrins, while we are working in our own local arena, we've also realised from the very beginning that we were part of a much bigger worldwide pattern, just as you've really pointed out there, of growing extractivism, and bringing with that all the cumulative consequences to the web of life. For us locally, how do we deepen this ecological consciousness, while maybe contributing something to a wider reimagining of our political and economic system? Another big question, but more on a local basis.
I think there are so many groups that are doing fantastic work. And I think the challenge is for people to connect with what is happening locally. So, and to make that opportunity accessible to people. One of the most successful things we did in Ireland around Laudato Si was a book club. And you would think book clubs, but it's finding entry points for people that mean that they're not put off, because our world is so busy and noisy and people's time is so precious that this can often feel like something extra on their to-do list. I remember when I wrote the Climate Generation, at the start of it, when I was kind of coming to terms with my own kind of responsibility in ecological as a mother, I kind of came to this question as oh, for goodness sake, right? So I have children now and I'm working full time and this and that. And now I have to get involved in saving the planet. It just seems too much.
Yeah.
But I think if people start to see it as part of their contribution, whether that's as a parent, I think parents are really, or grandparents. Grandparents are often very connected into the kind of longer perspective. I don't know if you have grandchildren yourself.
Oh, I do.
Yeah, people. I'm not a grandmother yet, but people say to me that once you have grandchildren, that generational gap or kind of distance makes you see things in a different kind of light. And working with grandparents is we've found that in Laudato Si movements, some of the groups like the Sage in Shankill in Dublin, they're the most active groups because they can play this role with their grandchildren. But I think that we need to be creative about how we engage people, that it's not well, we know that the doom and the gloom story doesn't work. That's proven. And it's quite interesting. We had this big event called Raising Hope in Rome recently, and 1,000 people came to it, and the Pope and Arnold Schwarzenegger and goodness knows who, and it was very uplifting. It was people from all faiths, all countries, but profoundly uplifting. And do you know what struck me? This is something people want to be part of,
Yeah.
because nobody compels people to go and get involved. So if they see people with long faces and shouting at them and telling them, I'm not saying anybody does this, but
Yeah.
if like the last people that people want to associate with are people who are kind of give off a kind of like, and we're right to be
Negative.
upset. Do you know, we're
Yeah.
right to be upset and angry and annoyed. But if we can begin to share a message of hope, of empowerment, and that we have, like, I mean, it sounds crazy, but having fun together, it shifts everything. And I think that was my biggest learning from this big event in Rome, is that if we manage to create that sense, and it's not a naive positivity, it's not a kind of wishy-washy, like, we'll all just be happy, but the joy that comes from realizing that we can be part of something great, and we can be part of trying to safeguard the future together. Um, Many people want to join that. I mean, the number of people who've written to me since that event to say, how do we stay connected, stay involved, is phenomenal, because, yeah, it's that dynamic of
Yeah.
like wanting to lead and to bring people together. So that's probably what I'd say.
And some great points there, and some of them, in fairness, we have discovered for ourselves. You know, we've tried it one way and then we tried it a different way, and we're quite a successful movement now. And success, people are interested in that, and they're coming on board. And we've had some very joyful celebrations recently. We had our 10-year celebration, and
Wow,
it was
congratulations.
joy from start to finish.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's, but you know, you brought up entry points is a good one there, and book clubs. There are things that hadn't occurred to me. Or, anyways, I what do I want in relation to speaking about grandparents. I have 2.5 grandchildren. There's one cooking.
One on the way.
Yeah, yeah, and I have been involved in the environment all my life. To be fair, and I also, I'm a yoga teacher, but I have, within the last 2 or 3 years, made a declaration to myself that I would dedicate the rest of my life to looking after the web of life going forward, and however that shows up for me. And it has shown up in many ways as a result. Also, many distractions have shown up as well to draw me away from that commitment. But as I have quite a large caring duty in relation to my grandchildren, and as I work with them on a daily basis, you know. I want them and all children the world over, particularly in the global south, to have a quality of life that they thrive in instead of just trying to survive. And that only comes with many, many changes in the world. And I'm just going to dedicate my life to that, and that's what I do, and that's what has me on here on 9 o'clock on Wednesday morning or 10 o'clock on Wednesday morning. You know, um, you have you've written 2 books. One, Climate Generation Awakening Our Children's Future, and The Emergence of an Economy of Communion. Would you like to tell us, I know you've already mentioned the first one, would you like to tell us a little bit more about them, and also where we might look for them, and I'll put them in the show notes later after this.
So I guess the Economy of Communion book is really the fruit of research that I did maybe 20 years ago, but I think it's still relevant, around new economic paradigms, and how we can shape an economy that really tackles inequality, tackles sustainability, and this idea that if we have a sense of community, the more that we have a sense of communion and community, the more we are able to see the relationships that govern the economy and foster um, new ways of economic thinking. That like the foundation of that is like I called it the sharing economy. Now that's become something else, so it means
Yeah.
Airbnbs and everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what I meant by it is really the kind of what's emerged in the library of things, toy libraries, cloth nappy libraries, all these
Yeah.
sharing sharing economies that build resilience in communities. Like they're often um, like those are going to become so much more important in the future as our like say financial and like an economic system has to grapple with all the costs of environmental destruction that we haven't factored into the economy. It will catch up
Mm-hmm.
with us. So I
Mm-hmm.
see those as really key. So that book is, I mean, it's written a couple of decades ago now, or actually 10 years, 12 years ago now. So, but still might be worth reading. Um, the climate generation is quite different. It's really was written as a kind of me coming to terms. It's written in the first person as my story. Me coming to terms with the kind of shift of being a climate and policy analyst, like so very much a heady person who'd done a PhD in this, to the heart. And that happened for me when I became a mum. And that movement from the head to the heart and how you grapple with that is what climate generation is all about. Um, so I don't hold much back. I kind of talk about my struggles and like thinking you're at some stage going a bit mad, going a bit mad, and the sense of fear and depression that can come over you when you realise you've given birth to these kids and what future do they have. So, and I wrote that really thinking about my friends, my sister, who kind of asked me at one stage, why are you interested in all this climate stuff? Have you not got enough to be doing? And I was like, well, people don't actually realize what's at stake, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
So I want to write something that's accessible. So that book is very much, it's quite simple in the sense of it's written in I got this climatologist John Sweeney, Professor John Sweeney, to work with me on the science side because I'm not a
Mm-hmm.
climatologist, but
Mm-hmm.
he worked with me closely on it to make sure it's a piece of science communication in as much as the story it tells about climate, but it's written in a way that makes it accessible. So both of the book can be purchased online.
Okay.
Yeah, so if people want to go and look them up.
Oh, that's great. Maria Garvey, my friend, recommended the first book, your earlier book.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh,
she did.
gosh.
Yeah, she read it years ago when it was
Right.
out. But I actually haven't read it either, and so I will look for your second book and
Yeah.
then work my way back to the first book
The
from
second book is actually out of print now because Veritas went bust. So I'm actually in the process of looking for a new publisher.
All right. Okay. Well,
So I
hopefully,
need to get one.
hopefully
But there's
some.
still copies out there.
Yeah. Okay. We should be able to get it. Okay.
Yeah.
Um. So in this podcast, we asked you questions at the end, and Lorna, is there someone you would recommend to speak on a future episode here, whose work and witness you feel deserves to be more widely heard?
So the person I'd recommend is a dear friend from Belfast. You might even know
Okay.
her. I would say Juanita Majuri,
I know of her. I don't actually know her. Go on ahead. Yeah.
who is uh, an amazing person who set up the Join the Dots for Climate Justice campaign in Northern Ireland. And yeah, I'd recommend you talk to her because she has such a vision, and she's one of these people who set something up from nothing. Like she didn't have she's got no budget or anything like this, but through sheer persistence and good humour and like getting people on board. So what she's achieved is quite amazing. And she works across all the faith communities in Northern Ireland.
Brilliant. That's great recommendation, and look out for her in the future. And then my last question, how do you personally sustain your sense of hope and faith in what you be up to in the world?
So for me, I think it's something that's very, very deep within me. And it's a profound faith in God's loving presence, in the divine, which sustains me. And I'll be honest, I see that everywhere. I see it in nature. I see it in other people. I see it in some crazy coincidences that have happened all through my life. And I've come this far. I mean, this is what sustained me for over 50 years. And it keeps growing stronger. So why stop now? Why stop now? For me, that belief in our purpose on this planet to be custodians and to care for the gift that we've been given in the time that we're here is far, far stronger than despair. And it gives me a belief that no matter how hard things are, no matter how negative it can all seem, everything can still change.
Dr. Lorna Gold, thank you for joining with me on this podcast this morning. Thank you for your work with Trócaire. Thank you for your work with the Laudato Si movement. And thank you especially for your love and custodianship for humanity and for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you.
What a thoughtful and wide-reaching conversation that was. My thanks to Dr. Lorna Gold for joining us and for bringing such depth, clarity and compassion to the challenges we face, not only here in the Sperrins, but across the world. Listening to her, I'm reminded that care for the earth isn't a separate task or a distant idea. It's a way of living, of choosing what we value and how we measure what truly matters. As we continue our work here in the Sperrins, I hope this conversation leaves you, as it has me, with a renewed sense of connection to place, to one another, and to the living world that sustains us all. Until next time, thank you for listening and for standing with us as we protect our common home. You've been listening to the Save Our Sperrins podcast, Voices from the Frontline. Thank you for joining us today. All the links you'll need, from campaign updates to our social media pages, as well as links shared by today's guests and resources mentioned in the conversation, are available in the show notes. Please take a moment to share this podcast with friends, neighbours, or anyone who cares about protecting our land and communities. And don't forget to hit the follow button on your podcast platform. It really helps the algorithm spread these voices further. Together, our voices are stronger. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep standing with the land, the water, the air, and the people who protect them.